let's start with this clip. This is from Megan Thee Stallion. She had something to say while she was in Atlanta.
I would have performed, and I'm so sad because the mayor of Atlanta is telling us that they still haven't resolved the water issue. That's really crazy that a major city in the U.S. is going this long without no motherfucking water.
That is crazy. Thank you, Megan Thee Stallion, for stating the complete obvious, but this was the week where a water main in Atlanta broke because of corrosion and lack of maintenance, put hundreds of thousands of residents on a boil alert, which means boil your water before brushing your teeth, bathing, cooking food with it. And it also happened to cancel Megan Thee Stallion's concert. So here is an image of the water main. It's like, okay, that doesn't seem insurmountable, but it has been days. Atlanta is still under a state of emergency on Monday as it battles disruptions in its water service that began last week, leaving a swath of a major city under boil advisories, highlighting the pervasiveness of problems caused by America's aging infrastructure. They've been plagued by water woes since Friday, when the first of two of a series of water main breaks emerged along two pipes, one a 36-inch pipe, the other a 48-inch pipe, that Dickens said were about a century old. I think they're just, that's Mayor Dickens. One of the pipes that had failed was installed in 1910, while another dated to 1930, the mayor said. Collectively, the breaks and repairs in progress have left parts of the city without water, under boil. We already went all over this. Here's just an image. Everyone, if you're listening, it's a massive part of Atlanta. This is huge, huge. And we're getting reports that actually Dickens left the city after he found out that there was this water break and this massive pipe break, because he had a fundraiser to go to in Memphis. He was headed there. He had to. He has an re-election fundraiser. Joshua P. Hill on Twitter said Atlanta doesn't have clean water, but has $100 million Cop City project. New York City libraries are closed Sundays, but our mayor wants a $225 million Cop City. This is another fun thing that happened this week. The U.S. doesn't have universal health care, but we spend $1 trillion on war. Under capitalism, violence comes before human needs. So, Max, I want to put this to you because it's just like, it's a pretty big fucking deal that a city the size of Atlanta is on boil alerts. And yet this is not the first time we've seen this. Obviously, Flint, Michigan, Jacksonville, Mississippi, same type of shit of allowing corporate corruption or or corporations along with city government to poison their own citizens in order to cut corners, or in this case, just not fix their water system.
Boy, oh boy, I got a lot to say about this, and you're right. It is a big deal, and I want to stress to everyone that it is happening all over the country. I know we won't probably have much time to go into the East Palestine stuff, so I'm gonna kind of merge some of what I was gonna say there to here because it's all connected, right? Yeah. I did not get into interviewing residents of East Palestine, Ohio, by accident. I did it because I was interviewing railroad workers before that, and that led me to the site where the train derailed last month. And then that has led me down a road of investigating and talking to working people living in other quote unquote sacrifice zones around the country. And the more I investigate that, the more I feel like I'm investigating a murder. And I realize that we are all across this country living in an active corporate crime scene because this shit is happening everywhere. It's not, and look at the source of this. One water main breaks, that shouldn't be too hard, but then see through the concrete, and what you will find is an infrastructure that has been rotted over decades and disinvested. And that's the case with our infrastructure across the country. We are living in the find out period of history, because for the past 30, 40 years, we've been coasting on deregulation, disinvestment. Oh, it's going to cost too much for those repairs. It's going to cost too much to refortify that bridge up, like
Yep.
get those lead pipes out of there. It's always costing too much. But again, as Joshua pointed out, we'll shell out money for cop cities. We'll shell out money with more and more tax breaks for the rich corporations that are not contributing to the tax base, while we're using all of our citizens' tax money to fund wars across the country that are obliterating our fellow working people. Like, we are being sucked dry. And I am seeing this kind of thing, the boil water advisories, the lead pipes. Like, this doesn't just happen in cities. It happens in rural counties that I've been to, where people drink from wells, and their wells are being tainted by big ag and the kind of hog and cow CAFOs that are running off into their water supplies. It's happening in, like you said, cities like Flint, cities like Jackson, Mississippi. Like, I'll read this one line from an NPR report that came out this year. Quote, in Chicago, about 400,000 homes still get their tap water through lead service lines, pipes that connect individual homes to the main water line, and nearly 70% of young children are getting exposed to lead from their home tap water, according to recent estimates published in JAMA Pediatrics. And of course, it disproportionately affects Black and Hispanic people. Like, that's not to say anything about like the PFAS that's in all of our water. North Carolina's water is basically all PFAS at this point. We're all half plastic because of all the microplastics we're ingesting. And like if you start tugging on this thread, DuPont poisoned the entire world. DuPont's chemicals are in the blood of everyone on the planet basically right now. Like, this is a real crisis, and it goes to the collapsing water mains. It goes to the Boeing planes where parts are falling out of the sky. It goes to the BP oil spill in the Gulf. I interviewed a worker who was on that rig when it blew, and what he told me was the same thing railroad workers have told me about why that train derailed, why workers are saying about why those Boeing planes are so shitty, because we are putting the needs of our shareholders and our executives and their bottom lines ahead of safety, ahead of like treating our workers better, and ahead of like any hazards that these corporate and Wall Street led practices cause to us and our children. Like, we are, this is everywhere. I just really want to stress that to folks.
No, I mean, go off. I love it. And you've written a lot, and yes, everyone needs to read, and we'll link to it. Max's, work in East Palestine, and those residents are still fighting for justice and for healthcare and things like that. But I'm like, Will, I feel like we're really close to like can we just let like Gatorade sponsor the piping system? Because I feel like you there'd be regular water, but then you get whatever, Polar Ice or Blue Crush or whatever the hell. I don't know what the Gatorade flavor is.
As long as it's not that nasty orange shit.
Yeah, anything but the orange, and I'm down, because like if they can make the water go, that's good.
You'd have to pay for premium Gatorade, which would just be clean water. It's actually, there's Riley Quinn, who's one of the hosts of the Trash Future pod. He was on an episode of Chapo Trap House. I think you have to pay for it, but if you just Google Riley Quinn Chapo on YouTube, you'll get like 9 hits for it, because they don't do takedown notices, I don't think. And he was talking about how in the UK right now, the privatization of their water systems, I think under Blair, led directly to the moment they're living in now, where raw sewage is just constantly pouring into the Thames. Like, there's just raw sewage in it. The big boat race that they have on the Thames every year. After the race, the boatsmen, I don't know who was on a boat, the rowers, they have to go take like a chemical shower after the race, because they're so the Thames is so dirty and poisoned. He talked about there are hospitals in the UK where if a patient is over a certain weight limit, they can't be on the second floor of the building, because the original construction materials, which was supposed to be temporary, was deemed, they retroactively deemed it as fit for use permanently. And now it's like they're worried the floors.
But it was like temporary. Oh God.
Yeah, temporary building materials that they just reclassified as permanent. Yeah. And the water system, it's a thing where all of the company that owns it is like based out of the UAE or something, and the people who own that company all went to school with the like British ruling class, because
Right.
almost all their politicians went to these insanely expensive private schools, and they all know each other. And it's like, what are you going to make a guy look bad in the public? What are you going to fine him or take his water company away from him? So they get these fines that are so much lower than the money they make. And then they go, well, look, if you let us raise the prices, we'll redo the pipes. And so they go, okay. And they raise the water prices, and then they just don't
My
redo the
God.
pipes.
Oh
Like,
my God.
there's no checks and balances.
No, not in the UK. What? They should have joined the EU. You know what I'm saying? Brexit was a mistake. I mean,
Yeah, that way Brussels would be the ones poisoning their water right now.
exactly. Max, when you talk about like it's all a product of deregulation. It's a product of the fact that honestly, even pre-Trump, we've been hollowing out the administrative state. We've been, slowly government has been taking a backseat to, yes, corporations doing whatever they want. And actually something interesting about Atlanta is that the citizens of Atlanta, the residents, voted for a 1 cent tax in order to, I believe, I don't know on what goods, right? Maybe it's just everything, right? Like a sales tax, in order to fix their water pipes. They've already are like, I mean, we'll pay. Like, you could take it out of our paychecks, our hard-earned cash, right? And of course, I guess they were planning on repairing this one. But my question is, it's like, what else is there to deregulate? When are corporations going to be like, we're good, Aren't, like, where else is there left to take from? I feel like they've already done it.
There's sadly a lot of dark answers to that question, but I mean, you're right.
No.
I mean, like, but
Like,
this is
Oh, fuck. I was really hoping you'd say, like, no, they've done it. Yeah, that's it.
This is as bad as it gets.
no, but I want to actually hook this into where we left off with the Trump discussion, right? When we played that clip of Trump saying, "I'm going to get rid of the Department of Education." Like, there are more things that they can cut, and they want to, and they will if given the chance to.
Yeah.
But like what I see in that clip and what I saw in the other clip, right? And what I just like, if you grew up conservative like I did, and you've like kind of made the journey to lefty nut job like I have, like you have a bit of a perspective, because I know what my conservative self would have thought if he was hearing that kind of stuff right now. I know the kind of things that would have been convincing to him.
Please tell us what would you have thought? Like, hell yeah, make libs cry.
Make libs cry. I mean, that's what they do. It's a puppet game. You hold up the puppets that like draw people's like existential and cultural ire. You blame everything on wokeness. You blame everything on like this encroaching culture. You blame everything on immigrants, on others, on parts of the culture you don't understand, trans people, like anything that feels like out of the quote norm, like that. You use that as an unknown entity and you play on people's fear of the unknown, and then you just grind that as much as you possibly can to keep people focused on how scared they are of each other, how much they hate certain segments of society, that they are missing the consistent part of all of these policies, which is that all of these policies serve the interests of big business and big Wall Street. You want to get rid of the DOE? That's going to be a boon for private, like, again, you mentioned Betsy DeVos. People like her are going to be like ready to rake in more millions and billions, right? If you talk about deregulation, you talk about what was Trump's signature policy achievement while he was in office last time. It was his goddamn Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It was one of the largest transfers of wealth up to the 1% and the rich corporations. That's where I'm going with this.
And it's expiring in 2025, so he's got to get back in there to renew it.
Oh my God. It like the amount, like, that's why I get so pissed when I talk to like right wingers, including folks in my own family who are like, well, what about the immigrant? Like, what about the crisis on the border? What about these other things where they are issues to talk about? You can't just wave them away and pretend they're not there. But in comparison to the theft that is happening on that level, again, the amount of money that is not going into our tax base because we keep cutting the corporations' taxes and the rich's taxes, and the amount of our taxes that are getting funneled into war and crap like that. Like, if you look at the scale, it is just astronomical. But that is what it is all driven towards, is serving the needs of big business and then like convincing us that we are each other's enemies. And I'll just give one concrete example there and then I'll shut up. Because again, as we said, I was in East Palestine 2 months ago. I had been interviewing residents there for the entire year prior, since the Norfolk Southern train derailed on February 3rd, only 3 days later to make the disastrous decision to vent and burn 5 cars of toxic vinyl chloride in the middle of a neighborhood. Like, I've been to people's homes. It's like a stone's throw away from a front porch where that train derailed.
I can't. I just have to state, like, that is so traumatizing. Like, that is terrifying.
Dude,
That would
there's
be in
no
your
relief.
neighborhood.
And there's no relief for those people. If you're, at least in California or Los Angeles, if there's like a fire in your apartment building, your landlord has to pay for you to be in a new apartment or home until those repairs are made.
Right.
And then it's like in East Palestine, it's like, well, I guess it's like, well, I don't know, like, you can move if you want, but like, good luck figuring that out now. Like, they're not even making it up to them. They're not even being like, oh my God, we fucked up so bad. I guess we have to rehouse all these people somewhere, which would be extremely bad, but would be better than just being like, bye, we did it. You're welcome, everybody.
Right. Yeah. So Max, where do things stand?
I mean, they're not much better than that. I mean, because like if folks want to go out and listen to the interviews I've done with residents, you will hear them talking about the hell they have been living through, the treatment that they have been getting from Norfolk Southern, but also their own government, their local government, the EPA, the federal government. There's so many people who have, and institutions and industries that have failed the residents, not just in East Palestine, but the folks living in and around East Palestine. It's not like that massive death plume that arose out of the derailment site when they vented and burned those cars of vinyl chloride just stopped at the East Palestine border. A lot of it went over into Pennsylvania, and folks there have been suffering ill effects and no one's been talking to them. That also introduces like the problem of having 2 different governors involved in this, one that's pushing for finally a disaster declaration, the other that hasn't. So like, you've just got this kind of awful carousel of people not taking accountability, while every single day people have been exposed to chemicals that are bioaccumulating in their bodies. They are still suffering ill health effects. They are very likely going to have like weird types of cancers and other health ailments that are already showing up. And now what the help that they're getting is a $600 million settlement from Norfolk Southern that is basically like a blood ransom that is going to amount to like maybe like $70,000 for like a household within 2 miles of the train derailment. That's for like property damage, and $10,000 for personal injury. Like, that's not going to cover years worth of cancer treatments and stuff. Like, it is nothing. It is nothing compared to what Norfolk Southern and the government have stolen from these people. These people are still going through hell. The country has forgotten about them. Their situation has barely changed at all. They need your help. So if anything, I'm begging people, please don't forget about East Palestine. Reach out to anyone you know and tell them, like, don't forget about them either, and try to help them as best you can. But the reason I bring it up is because I was standing in white working class Trump country. This is a town that voted for Trump. This is a part of the country that voted for Trump. And like, I'm there, again, crazy Mexican radical from Baltimore coming in there, and like, but we're all talking together as just human beings, fellow working people who are there to try to help. But what pisses me off is that, like, again, this makes the point I was making before, is that East Palestine is just a few miles away from Youngstown, Ohio. That's where the famous Lordstown GM plant was. And I have a special connection to that plant because in the very first season of my show, Working People, I interviewed workers at that plant. This was after Trump in 2017, like, pushed through the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, then immediately went to all of his rich friends in Mar-a-Lago and said, you all got a whole lot richer. And then GM and its CEO, Mary Barra, they all benefited from those tax cuts. And then what did they do in 2018? They still shuttered that plant. They laid off 14,000 workers across the company, and they were in the black. They did it to like make even more money. And so like Trump was in Youngstown, Ohio in 2017 telling white working class folks, auto workers and their community members, don't sell your home because we're bringing all the manufacturing jobs back. Then he cut the richest taxes. The company laid a bunch of people off, shuttered the plant, broke up the community because people who are still employed have to go then try to find work at other plants. And now Trump and the GOP and Fox News and all these fuckheads are out there trying to tell white working class folks like the people in Ohio, like in East Palestine and Youngstown, that people like me and my family and my immigrant foster daughter are the enemy, while they are like they're fucking all of us over. Like, that's what I'm trying to get.
Well, and I think you put your finger on it, and I think the lie becomes even more tenuous and thin the more and more we all are in agreement that Boeing flights should be triple checked, and there should be, whistleblowers should not be sort of weirdly died off, undeaded, right? Like,
Man,
unalive.
I love to blow the whistle and then immediately commit suicide. That's one of my favorite things in the world to do. That makes a ton of sense every single time I do it.
I want to like have this massive impact, but then not actually live to see it.
Yeah.
So
especially once I've done it and they can't threaten me. Once I've done it, then at that point, they can't continue to threaten me against doing it. They have to move on to whatever's next. But now people also know I'm kind of a public figure, so I'm probably safer than before,
Right. Oh God, no. I mean, it's really chilling, and this is, it's the same thing with like, why don't we like the conspiracy that's right in front of our face? The corporate conspiracy to poison our food, our air, our water, and like nobody now we just want to get mad at big pharma for the vaccine. Like, can we just refocus a little bit of this like anger at corporations? And again, I think a lot of this I think it actually perfectly dovetails with some of the COVID anti-vax conspiracy stuff, because it is years and years of unchecked wealth hoarding in like the pharmaceutical industry and overcharging and killing people, and like broaden that out to the private healthcare industry in general. And that is such a festering wound of like unfettered capitalism that it's totally ripe when COVID comes around that you'd have everyone just like glom on to hating big pharma, because they're right in a lot of ways, but they're wrong on exactly how to fix it, or they're wrong on the specifics. And I think similar to, what you're saying is like, there is a lot of crossover if we actually focus on workers' rights, climate protections, which have all been super politicized, when like Republicans know, like, yes, Republicans in rural areas are like, solar makes way more sense. It just does. Like, this is going to save me, my town, a lot of fucking money. But because Fox News tells them that it's AOC trying to, make their kids Green New Deal trans, then they won't do it,
Right. I mean, like, and it's like you said, like this is the kind of trap that we end up in, but it's exactly what I was trying to say about Trump, right? Is like, we get caught up in like the kind of shadow game between us without seeing the larger picture that's happening above our heads, right? Like, yeah, I ain't got no love for big pharma. I ain't got no love for capitalism, right? I mean, like, again, this system is designed to fuck us over and squeeze as much profit out of us as it possibly can, while devaluing our lives and yada, yada, yada. So you're right. Like, yeah, anyone, like, people have very legitimate gripes about big pharma and our shitty healthcare system writ large in this country. America is not the greatest country in the world. And you know who keeps telling me that? Residents of other sacrifice zones, including former Republicans who said, I thought I loved this country, and then this country showed me how little it cares about me and my community. This is one of the most consistent things I hear from different communities. So like, think about them when folks out there are thinking about big pharma and COVID and the vaccines. Again, you have legitimate gripes against these systems, but I promise you, the people in the halls of power, the people who are making decisions in those boardrooms and in those like, backdoor meetings that are happening on Capitol Hill, George Carlin said it best. They do not give a fuck about you or me. They do not care about any of us. So stop identifying with them because they do not identify with you. And there's a perfect case to be made with COVID about how the culture war that was created and stoked during COVID, like all these anxieties and tensions that people were feeling, those were weaponized against us so that institutionally we could dig our own graves, essentially. I'll give the one example. When the Supreme Court knocked down like Biden's ruling about requiring like weekly testing for large employers or vaccine mandates, yada, yada, yada. That got struck down. Everyone saw it as a win. Okay, if that's a win for your side, if you feel that way, fine. But read the goddamn ruling, because what it is doing is saying employers are not responsible for a general emergency that affects people outside of the workplace. So that wasn't a win for you. That was a win for employers who don't want to be held accountable when you go into work sick and die, or when you drop dead from the heat as climate change gets worse. They are no longer liable because of that ruling, and you cheered it on. So that's what I would ask you to think about.
No, I love that. And just like the amount of like propaganda that the right, I mean, a lot of them died because of it, but they were fed was all by people who work in buildings that absolutely tested them every single day for COVID, that absolutely had mandates and requirements, or they were like the only person in their podcast studio, and fucking didn't have to interface with fucking anybody, you know? But they were, you know, the frontline workers. Max, I'm going to let you go because I know you got to bounce, but I wanted to ask you one more question because I do think it is relevant. What you cover feels very stark when you look at a Trump v. Biden rematch, because Biden has been nibbling around the edges of trying to turn us away from just everyone being like a sacrifice zone, you know, whatever, like microplastic little zombie. And Biden with, you know, the infrastructure plans, you know, obviously the Inflation Reduction Act, and then along with some of the moves that they're making in antitrust and trying to go after these big conglomerates, as well as his National Labor Relations Board being incredibly progressive. Like, there are these glimmers, but it's not bright enough. It's not loud enough. I'm curious how you think that is or isn't breaking through to some of those folks who might be tempted to go back to Donald Trump.
It's a great question. So I'll try to answer as best I can under the confines of my nonprofit newsroom that I'm currently sitting in, right? But like, just to, answer the question like you posed it, like, what am I hearing from other working people around the country as I go around talking to them about their lives, their jobs, their dreams, their struggles, whether they are, you know, living in a sacrifice zone in Louisiana or New Mexico, or whether, you know, they are being exploited at their, you know, a shop at work, a sandwich shop in Seattle, or a manufacturing plant in the Midwest, right? Like, what I am hearing from so many folks is that, like, in terms of the like general condition for working people, you know, life continues to get worse. But I really like, you got to take that in the broader sweep. Like, that, again, these lead pipes, or these pipes that are collapsing around us, that did not just happen under one administration. Like, this happened over decades of neoliberal disinvestment and deregulation, and like, everyone has culpability there, and it's going to take more than just one administration to fix it. So we have a real big responsibility here to not only articulate our priorities as working people across, like, get the red state, blue state crap out of your heads. Because again, what I can tell you as someone who's going around 2 red states and blue states is this shit is happening in both, right? Like, so do not fall into the trap of well-paid, you know, like Fox News pundits telling you that like somehow, you know, it's only red states that this is happening to. They're not drinking your water. They're not like going through what you're going through. But I can guarantee you, working people in blue states and blue cities, Black people, Latino people, Indigenous people, even the LGBTQ people you fear so much, your fellow worker is going through this a whole lot more than the well-paid pundits on TV telling you not to care about it, or the
Yeah.
well-paid politicians out there. And what it's going to mean for us is that, like, I'm so grateful, Francesca, that you said, like, look, we cannot just pretend that both Biden and Trump are the same. We actually do ourselves and our fellow workers a huge disservice by, like, just flattening the gradient there. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can say both of these parties fucking suck, and at the top level they are conspiring with big business to ultimately screw over us, destroy our planet, enrich the billionaire class, so on and so forth. But that if we are, as working people, going to dig ourselves out of this hole, the change is going to have to come from us. That was the message when I was standing there in East Palestine, is that our communities need to be banding together around the issues that really matter to us and our lives. A breathable air and drinkable water, like a future for our children, like safety and security for just like our communities. And, like, you know, the real basics. That's what I hear from people in blue states and red states. And that's so seldom what I hear in the political discourse happening around the campaign trail. So what we need to understand is that we need to set the agenda for our priorities as a class of what we are going to be fighting for in the society that we need to be living in if we're going to have a future worth living in. We can't just keep letting the two-party system define what that is for us.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.